All right, so we're here with our open forum number 5. And today I do have a few things that I wanted to go over before we get into MICIP. So right now I'm looking at our dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and copy that link real quick and put it into the chat. Boy, my computer really is behind my brain today. Here we go. All right, so there's a link to our dashboards in the chat. And just a few things on the dashboard, a few things that I've changed since last time. I made a video playlist. So the links are there for all the videos, but there's also a playlist now on YouTube. And just a reminder about the videos, they are all bookmarked. So if you go in and there's just something specific that you want to see in the video, so you don't have to watch the whole half hour or 45-minute long video, they are bookmarked. So it's pretty easy to find the specific topic that you might be looking for. And I will link today's video this afternoon after we're done. So a few updates for today. I think the biggest one, probably most people are familiar with this. We've been talking about the process guides, and the process guides we're really going to get into. They're really for, I would say, district leadership use, district and school leadership use. They're not something that you want to try to dig through with. Oh, I'm seeing that I'm not displaying something. Hold on, I must have shared the wrong screen.
Correct.
One of the, yes. Thank you, Rachel. Am I showing the right thing now? Can I get a thumbs up? Look like I'm showing the right thing? Okay, good. Yes, one of the downfalls of multiple screens. One of the first things on the agenda today is about the MICIP process guide. That's something that's we've been talking about coming out for quite a while, and it's finally out. It's 90-something pages long, so it's definitely very thorough. I haven't had time to dig through the whole thing myself, but the parts that I've looked at, I've been really appreciative of them. Again, I think that this is really something more for the leadership teams to take a look at. So it might be your school or district administration, or maybe your school or district teams, and probably not something that you want to like kind of start beginning to end with. It's really kind of situational. We're on this part. Maybe you'd want to brush up on some of the background of what's supposed to be happening when you're digging into that portion of MICIP. The only thing that I wanted to look at together today was in the appendix. They have some sample plans in the appendix, and I think they're pretty good. It looks like this was done by MICIP. I'm not sure if anybody's here that's on MICIP, but it looks like they really put a lot of time into these plans. And I think that, they start with, a sample data set. So kind of like what we're doing, but instead of working through it together, they kind of made some plans for us to kind of go in and take a look at. So, here was an elementary example where they were looking at literacy. They have a variety of different data from MSTEP to IRIP to, just all kinds of different data is in here. And so they actually showed the different data examples that they used. They went in and they said, these are the sorts of conversations that we had around the initial data analysis, all the parts that we've kind of been working through. So I think that these look really good. They filled out a fishbone diagram. They did the 5 whys. So these are the 2 things that we're actually going to be talking about today in our session. But it's always, you're always like, well, what would it look like when this is done? How much are people putting into it? What kind of, when it says 1 sentence, does it really mean 1 sentence? Or, how many measures should we write? And anyway, there's just lots of good examples here. Again,
it's a lot of stuff.
This was an elementary example, but they also have middle school and high school examples in here. So I wanted to point that out. When you get a 95-page document, sometimes it's hard to know like where to go and what to do with it. And I think the sample plans are really pretty great and a good place to maybe start just to take a look at what some of the samples might be. The table of contents in it is all linked. So you can just click on it, it'll go to that section. So if you were just getting to, defining measurable goals with your team, you can just pop right to that section and you can maybe read up on that before meeting with your team or that sort of thing. So Again, it's not like a read to begin to end kind of document. I think it's you want to jump around in it. You want to pull out those parts that you are more interested in. Probably the audience is your administrative team or maybe your leadership teams. Anybody else had a chance to get into the process guides and take a look at them and have anything that they might want to add, or anybody from MICSI? I know they did a ton of work on this. Anything anybody else that wants to add to that before we move on? All right. The next thing that I wanted to point out, I am still working with many districts on getting connected, and this flowchart that was recently released, I think is probably the best resource that I've seen for how to get connected. So if your district, oops, that's really zoomed in. If your district is not connected yet, I really recommend taking a look at this little flow chart. It's pretty simple, and it has kind of all the stuff that we've been talking about. You need to sign the data hub agreement, you need to sign the MICIP agreement, and you need to get signed up. You need to get your district federated. So there's a lot of other kind of steps and things like this that you can add, but those are the three main pieces that we've been talking about all the time. So I think this is a pretty good resource. If you're not connected yet, I really recommend taking this and taking a look at it. There are some things that need to be accomplished by the superintendent. There are some things that need to be accomplished by your tech department, but I think that this is a good resource. And the last thing that I wanted to go over before we jumped into MICIP is I've been getting some questions about the paper template. So as we know, this 1 year, because of all the stuff that's going on, COVID, starting the new process partway through the year, just all the different hardships and trials and tribulations that everybody's going through, MDE is going to make a paper version of MICIP available this year. And so I've been getting a lot of questions about that. And when's it going to, what is it? What does it look like? How long is it going to take? Do we have to then take it and put it into MICIP later? Just, I'm getting a lot of questions about it. You know, when's it going to come? And so one of the statewide groups that I'm working on, Ben Borkel, who many of you know is the person that's leading this effort at MDE, he emailed that group this email, and I pasted it in here. And so I won't read it to you, but just know that it's in here. And basically, to kind of summarize, is they're working on it. They're hoping to get it out by January 15th. It's just a 1 year fix. So it's not something that we're going to be able to do again into the future. And basically, he's really recommending that everybody still sticks with MICIP if you're able to do that, and not try to rely on the paper version of it. So those were kind of my main updates that I had before we get into the system. Is there anybody that has any questions or anything to add on any of those three items before we jump into MICIP? Amy said that there was a memo that got released about that today. Was there anything, Amy, was there anything different in that memo, or is it just kind of cover the same stuff? I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Same stuff as you just mentioned, but official.
Okay, all right. So more official than just the email from somebody at MDE. Thanks, Amy.
I think one nuance that you might have already mentioned is that January 15th is when they said the template would be available.
Yep, good. All right, oh, I'm seeing more info in the chat. So let's see here. MICIP doesn't work. Yes, and Fatme, I'll make sure that I go over that when I get into the system. If I forget to mention that, remind me, please. All right, so at this point, let's kind of talk about what we've been doing so far with our open forum. Our first couple of sessions, we really kind of dug into mindset and background and team formation and that sort of thing. We spent quite a bit of time on trying to get connected, how to get into the system, how to get logged in, how to get federated, all that kind of stuff. So those are really our first two sessions before we were able to finally get in and start working through. We worked on data discovery for a couple of sessions. And today I'm really, we are going to be moving into the root cause analysis. So what we've been doing is we have been using a mock data set that it's real data, but it was compiled from a variety of different districts. And that is linked, that mock data set is linked here under today. It says mock data set. And so what we did was we really wanted to pull together a data set that tried to represent the whole child. So one of the main differences about MICIP is that there's more of a whole child emphasis. And so we wanted to pull a data set together that that didn't rely on state testing data. So this data set that we have SRSS data, we have MiFi data, we have some school climate survey results in there, we have some process data in the tiered fidelity inventory. So we really tried to pull together a data set that might be able to tell a story about a district that has more of a whole child emphasis. So we have been using the same data set, and we've been kind of pretending that we were a team that was getting together to work on this stuff, and using this data set as our template. We've been keeping all of our conversation in this group data discovery notes. So if everybody could also open that up, we're going to be using that today as well. And so using that data set, we went through initial data discovery, and these were what some of the different groups came up with as far as some initial data discovery. We also did the initiative inventory analysis. And so these were some of the ones. The one that was bold was the one that I kind of selected as, that I selected to just kind of put into the system. So if you see one that's bold, that's why. We also went through the gaps between current reality and desired state. And we left off with the district data story summary. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about fishbone diagrams and the 5 whys, which is the root cause area. And so I'm hoping to kind of get through those two today. So the last thing I want to talk about before getting into MICIP itself was I took all of the information that we've had so far, and I made a fishbone diagram about our data so far. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. You guys can open it too. It's right on the dashboard. So the way that fishbone diagrams work is you take whatever your problem of practice is, and you put it in kind of I'll say the head of the fish. And then up at the ends of the bones, you kind of try to think of what are maybe some of the main drivers that go into this problem of practice. And then the kind of little bones under each one of those drivers are maybe some of the details or reasons that those pieces are there. And so this is really, it's a brainstorming tool. It is something that can be done in a group setting. It's not a very good whole group setting. It's something that I think works really well with small groups. So if you had a couple of different problems of practice, you could maybe break it up into some small groups and then come back together and get some feedback on what was discovered. But you know that you end up with a good fishbone when you could take anything that's any of these drivers and replace that in the head of the fishbone, and it would give you could start the whole process again and really dig into that one thing. So if our problem of practice was the school needs to better respond to student social emotional health concerns, so again, that's kind of what our data set was about. That was a problem of practice that I put together. So the main drivers of that, what kind of looking through all of the different things that our groups brainstormed in the last few sessions, we had some lack of communication with parents. There was a lack of family engagement, some disjointed community supports, initiative overload with our staff, a lack of professional learning in the area, and finally concerns with how we engage with students. So if those were the drivers, we could literally take any of those and we could replace those into the head of the fishbone and start the process again to dig even more deeply. So it's pretty complex to kind of get into this and time consuming with fishbone diagrams. And there's other ways to brainstorm and think of problems, but this is what's in MICIP. And so I wanted everybody to have a little bit of experience to see one and to think about one a little bit. When we get into MICIP here in a second, our first group activity is I'm going to have everybody get into and have a conversation around this fishbone diagram. Now, I know it's kind of artificial because I made it instead of us kind of working on it together. But again, in the interest of time, it's pretty time consuming to put one of these together. And I think that is kind of instructive in itself, that this is a very time consuming process. And if you're going to use this for a root cause analysis, you'll want to have some good facilitation skills around how to do it, and also set aside the time to be able to do it. So those are the resources we're going to use today. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sign into MICIP now. And of course, there's an error. Let's hope that it'll still let us in. Let's try that again.
Yeah, I'm also having trouble getting into mine.
Okay. Boy, that'd be very disappointing. Hey, you let me in.
You're good though.
That'd be very disappointing if we weren't able to get in today.
So David, the training site is still live then, right? We can play around with, okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Hilda. The training site is live. They're going to keep it live so that if you wanted to get in and do any training with a group or anything like that, you can still get in there. You can still mess around with it and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a very good thing. They're keeping that open.
Thank you.
Yep. So here is the current our current data story that we have. So this is our improving social emotional well-being, and I'm going to go back to the analyze data portion here. Discover data. And just to kind of get everybody caught up to where we are so far, and I also want to address what Fatma put in the chat. What I did was I showed you guys that that data set earlier. These are all those individual pieces of that data set uploaded. So you can go in, you can actually look at the different data objects right in here. And as new data becomes available, you can add that to these data sets. So it's kind of nice. So if we had our 1920 MiFi was here, then we could add this same graphic for our 2021 data if we wanted to do comparisons and those sorts of things. But down below, this is where all of our data discovery is. And these were all the things that we've talked about in our past meetings. So I want to talk a little bit about what Fatma put in the chat. Multiple people can be logged in and working on this at the same time, but it's not a good idea. So if I'm sitting here and working on this, and then Hilda is sitting at her computer and working on it, we're only going to see what we're typing if we're typing in the same box. And so there's this workaround where if you hit save, it'll keep whatever you had and it will delete whatever somebody else was working on if you're typing in the same box. So what their workaround is, if you hit the refresh button, it will show you what you have and whatever that person had, and then you can hit save. I don't recommend even trying to do that. You're going to overwrite somebody's stuff. It's going to be a mess. And so my recommendation is that you, if you're trying to collaboratively do this work, that you do it in a Google Doc and then pull it over, sort of like what we're doing, with this data discovery notes that we have. Just do it in a Google Doc and wordsmith it and have as many people mark it up and comment on it and edit and whatever you want. And then when you get it to where this is the way that you want it to look, then somebody goes and pastes it into MICIP. I don't recommend trying to wordsmith and collaborate around it right in MICIP. And I think that was, I think they're saying that they're going to come out with maybe a Google Doc that you can use in the meantime. Hopefully it's something that they'll work on for a future release that'll make it so that multiple people can collaborate in it, sort of like it's a Google Doc. But for right now, I recommend really trying to just do it in a Google Doc and then paste it in. So that's, yeah, that was something I think that it sounds like they put that in the memo as well today. So where we had left off last time was we understood all the data sources. We went through all the data discovery where we were really digging into them and trying to learn more about the data and figure out our gaps and write a data story and that sort of thing. So then what happens next was you come over here to analyze. And so we're in the root cause analysis place now. And like we talked about, you can either do that fishbone diagram, which I did for us today, or you can do 5 whys, or you can add your own. And I'm saying or here because it doesn't let you do more than one of these things in the system. If you try to do one, if you did a fishbone and said, okay, great, now let's do 5 whys, it'll give you a warning and say you're about to delete your other work. So it only, at this point, it only lets you choose one of these items. And we talked about this a little bit last time, but I think that the fishbone and 5 whys work really well together. If I really wanted to dig into root cause, I would do a fishbone first, and then I would identify what was the most important driver, and then I would do 5 whys around that. So that's actually what we're going to do today. The third option is to add your own. And this is where if you had a different process, you do not have to do a fishbone. You do not have to do 5 whys. If you had a different way to dig into the root cause, you can do that. So the add your own, basically you just come in and it just says, go ahead and summarize it. And then if you have anything that you want to add to it, you can upload it here. I'm going to hit cancel on that. Trying to think of how to go back. It's not letting me. Oh, come on. The dreaded back button. Let's see what happens. It put me into an endless loop. Change tool. There we go. Okay, so that add your own piece. Again, you can type it in and upload it. Fishbone. There's nothing. This is not an interactive tool. You basically just describe what it was and you can upload the fishbone if you wanted to. And I gave you guys some fishbone resources last time. The 5 whys, it does actually let you put the 5 whys right in there. So, so for today, what I'd like to do is I'm gonna break everybody into some groups of 3, and we're gonna spend, again, all of the time on this is never quite enough. So we're only gonna spend about 12 minutes on this first part. But what I'd like you to do is in our data discovery, so you'll need to have the fishbone open and the data discovery template open. And then you can click right on fishbones right here. And it'll take you down to the fishbone area. I put here, how would you summarize the findings from our fishbone? So if you take that fishbone, and we'll have a little conversation around that. And then there's a couple other things that I want you to do. So one, how would you summarize it? Go ahead and type in kind of what your summary would be. And then the second thing that I'd like you to do is pick one of the bones as the main driver that you would like to do a 5 whys around. So first kind of summarize what you see here, and then say, you know what, we really think that the best way to get at this is if we address our initiative overload, or we think the best way to address this would be to think more about our family engagement. So pick one of those drivers that you really, really want to do a 5 whys on. So first we're going to summarize it. Pick one driver for 5 whys. And we're not going to do the 5 whys right now, but that's going to be our next step. And then the third thing, if there's any time left, those were just things that I brainstormed that could be drivers. But what are some other drivers? So I just was thinking of things like school rules or school policies, or the climate and culture of the school. What are some other things that could be drivers? So so those are the 3 things. First thing, do a summary. Make sure before we come back together that you've picked one driver that your group might want to dig into to do a 5 why analysis on. And then if there's any time left over, just kind of talk about what other drivers might be applicable here. So so again, have the fishbone open, have the group discovery open. And I'm going to remember to stop the recording while everybody's in, in our breakouts, and I'll try to remember to start it again when we get back. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start our recording back up. I'm not sure if everybody caught my little broadcast message, but I did kind of broadcast a message out to, if there was time, or, maybe just to kind of think about separately is, what are the circumstances that doing this sort of this brainstorming and really trying to get down into the weeds on a problem, what are some of those contexts where that might make sense to do? When would it not make sense to do that? How could that be facilitated? So those are all some things to really think about. Again, it's not like every time we get together to work on continuous improvement, we need to do another Fishbone or something like that. I think it's pretty context specific, and I think that's just another kind of consideration in this whole thing. I think that it does spark some really interesting conversation, especially if people are working together to build the Fishbone, not just looking at one that's completed. But it's definitely something that could be completed with a small team and then used with the whole team to spark debate or conversation. So yeah, it's just another tool that's kind of in the toolbox. I'm going to share my screen again. And one of the questions that came up or clarifications was, so it sounds like we can only use one of these, right? And so I want to show you that we can use more than one. But it's just, it's a little bit of a workaround. So if I were to say the only way we were going to analyze root cause was with the Fishbone, then I would go into the Fishbone and I would say analyze root cause. And again, you can't, this is just a picture of a Fishbone. You can't actually do anything with it. But I might take some of the summaries that we just talked about, or maybe, that summary that Tom just verbalized, I would put that right here. And then I would click add document and I would drag and I would upload that Fishbone, right? However, if I did that and I added that to the data story, that's the only root cause analysis right now that you can put in there. Because if you're like, okay, we're done with that one, now let's change our tool to the other one. When I hit change tool, it says, are you sure? Because we're going to delete this one. So you can't, right now, you can't have more than one tool is what I'm trying to say. So the workaround that I've been thinking about for this is that I would actually go back to the data discovery and I would upload the Fishbone diagram that we just completed as a new data set, right? So this is new data, and this is kind of an area that we've been hearing, that, hey, this process is more nonlinear. This is an example of how the process is more nonlinear, right? So we just completed that Fishbone diagram, and so I want to make a new data set. So I'm going to upload some new data, and I'm going to go ahead and drop that in as soon as I can find where I stored it. Yep, so here's our Fishbone. So this was our January SEL Fishbone. And I could, that summary that we just talked about, I could put that right here. So I'm just gonna go and pick one. I'm gonna pick group 6. And I'm going to say that this was our summary that we are going to use for this. So I'm going to paste that summary right here. This is an other data source. And I'm going to add that to our spot. So here it is. It's our January SEL Fishbone. And so I can pop that open, and our Fishbone that we just talked about today is now part of our data set. So that is how I would kind of work around that. You don't have to necessarily just choose one. You can still run the process, and then you can come back and you can upload it into the data story. So then what you could do is, hey, we just had all these conversations. Did that change the way that we thought about our data? Maybe you would want to do an update to your data discovery or your initiative analysis. Geez, after looking at all the different initiatives that are going on right now, I forgot there was these 5 other ones that are still going on. So you could come in and you could update your initiative analysis. So that's kind of what they mean about it being a nonlinear process. You can, all the pieces that you do along the way can become new data sources that then get plugged into the system. So kind of knowing that now, I probably, if you want to do both of these, the Fishbone and the 5 whys, or something, the Fishbone and something on your own, that's kind of how I would run that. So with our remaining time today, I want to talk about 5 whys. This is one that folks are probably more familiar with. So I'm going to go into analyze root cause here. And from here, the way that this works is they do give you the capability to actually run this right in the system. But for reasons why, that we kind of shared earlier about trouble with collaborating with multiple people typing and that sort of thing, I still think it'd be easier to do it in a Google Doc and then plug it in here. And so basically, you could just come in and you would say, this was our first Y, and then you complete that conversation. You'd say, okay, so why is this the case? Then you come in and you would add your second Y, so this is Y2. You'd have that conversation and you'd say, okay, so then why aren't our parents coming in on parent nights? So you'd add the Y. Well, our parents aren't coming in on parent nights because we didn't get our information sent out. Well, why didn't we get our information sent out? So what they're saying is if you do that for 5 times, you're likely to end at what the actual root cause is that you can kind of dig into. And we've talked a little bit about this before, but you really need to, this is a little tough to facilitate with groups, or at least everybody has to have this understanding. The things that you put down have to be things that are in your control. So you can't say, well, why do the kids do bad on English language arts? Because their parents didn't read to them when they were born. Okay, what can we do about that? There's nothing we can do about that right now. So, you really have to try to redirect the conversation to the things that we can control. So earlier I had you select one of those drivers as one that you wanted to try to actually do the 5 Ys on. And I think this is really important for us to actually try this together before you ask somebody else to do it, because it's, if you haven't been on the doing end of this, it's not as easy as it sounds. It's hard to keep the conversation focused on things that we can control. It's hard to recognize when you've gotten to what you think is the actual root cause and you can't dig any deeper. Sometimes people only want to go through one thing and they're like, well, that's it. That's the root cause. Other times you'll be at the 5th Y and you're like, but what about this? What about this? And you could end up with 20 Ys. So it's actually pretty kind of difficult to do the process. So I want everybody to struggle just a little bit with that. On that note, right in our data document that we've been using, the next one is a spot. And so I have 5 Ys in each one of these. So pick a box from your group. You guys will be in the same groups. And you identified a thing that you wanted, or a driver that you wanted to examine for the 5 Y. So I'm going to put you in that group and we'll do 10 minutes. If you don't get through all the Ys, it's fine. There's no pressure on this. I just wanted everybody to try it out and just kind of struggle with the process a little bit, because you might be asking other people to do this and it's not as easy as it looks. So I'm going to go ahead and open those groups up for 10 minutes. Then we'll come back and wrap up. All right, welcome back, everybody. So I know that, like with all our stuff, that time was real short. I see that some of the groups were able to get to 5. I see one of the groups got to 4, and they decided that was where they wanted to stop. They found their root, and the root of their issue. They thought they hit that after 4. So this 5 Y analysis, it's not like a hard and fast. It's like, you must know, you got to go one more, think about it a different way. If you really think that you've hit the root cause there, you can stop after, fewer than 5. I've heard of people saying you can go more than 5. It's at some point you can start talking yourself into circles, so you kind of have to figure out at some point that's, this is where we're going to stop. So I'm just we're going to wrap up just to honor everybody's time. But basically what we would do at this point is you would actually come in and you would paste in those different pieces, and you'd hit finish analysis. Oh, it's telling me this is required here. This is Y3. Okay, so we'd hit finish analysis.
Dave, are you going to show us what you're doing there?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to share my screen. Thank you. Share screen. Everybody else is just going to let me keep talking to nothing. There we go. So on this 5 Y screen, we would actually just paste in, this was our first Y, this is our second Y, this is our third Y. When we got to wherever, like I was saying with that one group, we got to the 4th Y, we would say right here, it would say finish analysis. And then you would add that to your district story. And so that then becomes part of this whole, that becomes part of the whole thing. So that is where we're going to actually start next time. I'll go in and I'll paste in one of our 5 Y analyses, and we'll start with that next time. And basically what it's going to have us do then is we're going to take that root cause analysis and all the data, and we're going to come up with what they call a challenge statement that we then base our goals off of. So that is what we'll start working on next time. So I want to honor everybody's time. I'm sure everybody has 2 o'clock commitments to get to. So, but if there's anybody that wanted to stick around for any questions or to talk through anything that we did today, I'd be happy to do so. So on that note, that's the end of our official content.